My name is Pierce, and I'm the director of the Transnational Literature Series here at Brookline Booksmith and your host for tonight's conversation. I want to open up the space by saying thank you for coming out tonight. The Booksmith has been around since 1961, and that's because of our wonderful community. You can hear them all bustling in the background. Your support means we can keep having events like this, so thank you again. As you may know, tonight's event is part of our ongoing Transnational Literature Series, which focuses on stories of migration, the intersection of politics and literature, and works in translation. If you enjoyed tonight's event, please check out our full events lineup online at brooklinebooksmith.com so you don't miss some of the amazing authors we have coming out this winter, both virtually and in store. You can also follow us on Instagram for updates. Toward the end of the event, we'll leave about 15 minutes or so for an audience Q&A followed by a signing. We have copies of tonight's featured book available over at the register. And please take a moment to silence your cell phones. I think that takes care of the business end of things, so I'd love to tell you a little bit about our guests. Tonight I have the very great honor of introducing Monika Herceg and Elias-Bursać, here to discuss and honor the release of Closed Season, a wildly beautiful collection that fuses physics with politics to create new ways to express how it is always open season when it comes to the horrors women deal with in our painfully patriarchal world. Of the book, Nobel laureate Olga Tokarczuk says that Herceg writes about a history that no longer belongs to the victors and about beauty that cannot fit into the confines we previously knew. Monika Herceg is a poet, playwright, essayist, feminist, activist, and editor at Fraktura Publishing. She is the author of 3 poetry collections, Initial Coordinates, Closed Season, and The Time Before the Tongue. She has received many, and I mean many, prestigious national and international awards, including the European Poet of Freedom Award and the Central European Award for Young Writers. Her poems, books, and plays have been translated into more than 20 languages. She lives and works in Zagreb. And tonight's moderator is Elias-Bursać, who has translated books by David Al-Bahari, Svetlana Brods, and Dubravka Ugresic, among many others. She received the National Translation Award for Al-Bahari's novel, God's Admire. She taught Bosnian, Croatian, and Serbian in the Harvard Slavic Department, and was also the president of the American Literary Translators Association. Between 1998 and 2010, she worked in the English translation unit of the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia in The Hague, and is the author of Translating Evidence and Interpreting Testimony at a War Crimes Tribunal. Very honored to have her tonight. She's a favorite here. I'm so pleased to have them here together in conversation, and now Monika and Ellen.
So we will start with reading. Hello everyone, and I'm very happy to be here. So I will be reading in Croatian and Alan will be reading in English. So, Marija Mirzakhani 3 beskonačnosti slaže na kruhu, sir i majonezu. Godinama sam bila dječak plašeći se svojih bedara, skrivala geografiju tijela pod širokim majicama, botanika je bujala. U tvojim dojkama gašenje dana bubri slično olujnim oblacima, ali pališ bez razmišljanja glavu kao svijeću, pa je puniš rimanovim plohama, svjesna da ljeto podgrijava tumore, da se matematika pokazuje upornima i nema veze ako će glasne geometrije uskoro preseliti u kosti. Ja još uvijek prije predavanja iz kvantne mehanike uplašeno odstranim ženu i sebe, pa pregovaram s Heisenbergom satima o neodređenosti grudi koje ostavljam na porti. A ti, Marijam, tvoja otkrivena glava nakon selidbe u crne kronike iranskih novina oštro gleda u muškarce uvrijeđene prekratkom kosom, puneći njihovu muškost do zadnje kapilare vertikalnom jednadžbom poraza.
Mariam Mirzakhani puts 3 slices of infinity on a toast with cheese and mayo. I've spent years being a boy, frightened of my thighs, hiding my body's geographies under baggy clothes. Botany was burgeoning. In your breast the extinguishing day swells, almost like storm clouds. Yet you, without a second thought, fire up your mind like a torch, feeding the flames with Riemann surfaces, well aware that the summer is heating up the tumors, that mathematics reveals itself to the persistent. So who cares if the noisy geometries soon spread to the bones? Before my quantum mechanics class, I still fearfully resect the woman out of myself, then spent hours on end discussing with Heisenberg the uncertainty of breasts which I leave at the doorman's desk. But you, Mariam, your uncovered head, from the obituary in Iranian media, now fiercely stares at the men offended by your close-cropped hair, filling their manhood to every last capillary with equations of vertical defeat. And let me just say that these are not my translations. I am a translator, but these are by a wonderful translator from Zadar named Marina Veverets. And she couldn't be here, but we communicated and she sent everybody her regards. And when we're reading the next poems, listen to the rhythm of the Croatian and you'll hear how she captures it in the English quite extraordinarily.
Yes. Just to say, Maria Mirzakhani was an Iranian mathematician, the only woman and the first woman who got Fields Medal in mathematics, and she died out of breast cancer when she was 40. And there is another poem about Emmy Noether, another great mathematician, whose theorems are basics for classical mechanics, later to evolve to quantum mechanics. I studied physics, fun fact. So there is another poem about Emmy. Teorem Emmy Noether naučila sam na faksu, pa mogu pretpostaviti Emmy da smo žilavo žensko meso. Objema crte lica govore, svaki je dan bio usamljena srijeda simetrična kao polutke tvoje pameti. Emmy, Emmy. Je li te hranila matematika tih 7 godina kad su muškarci uzimali iz tvog mozga, nikad plativši uz izliku da u tebi ima samo brojčanih vrijednosti? Danas bi te zatvorili u računalo, proglasili umjetnom inteligencijom i nazvali nekim koketnim imenom, Vanda ili Irma, pa pustili da algoritme pretvaraš u potreban broj bombi na kontinentima da ne dođe do nuklearnog rata. Sjećam se kako su ti zavirivali po teorem na satovima klasične mehanike, misleći da je sigurno ispod brkato muško. Emmy, više ne stanemo u jednadžbu. Neke žene vjeruju da je u vrijeme lova dopušteno gurnuti druge žene na rub izumiranja. Tad osjetim oštru simetriju opstanka i znam da je i tvoja majka, kad si plakala, prisluškivajući stajala pred sobom, nikad otvorivši vrata.
I learned Emmy Noether's theorem in college. I guess it's safe to say, Emmy, we're 2 tough pieces of female flesh. It's clear from the lines of our faces each day was a lonely Wednesday, symmetrical as the hemispheres of your cleverness. Emmy, Emmy, did mathematics feed you those 7 years when men took ideas out of your brain, never having paid you on the excuse there's nothing to you but numerical values? These days they would have crammed you into a computer, branded you as artificial intelligence and given you a more seductive name like Vanda or Irma, then used your algorithm to count the number of bombs required on every continent to avert a nuclear war. I remember the way they peeked under your theorem in classical mechanics lectures, thinking a mustached man must be in there somewhere. Emmy, I don't fit into the equation anymore. There are women who believe when it's hunting season, it's fair to push other women to the brink of extinction. It's then that I feel the sharp symmetry of survival and know your mother, too, would stand outside your room, listening to you crying, but never open the door. And before we read this next one, I just want to say that I contacted Marina before this, and she and I were part of a workshop a few years ago. So I asked her if I could give some of her words that she wrote to join the workshop, just to bring her into our event today. And so here we have what, and she agreed that I could read them. I see the profit of our work. She said, speaking to some of the translators and editors, it became clear that there aren't many translators working from Croatian into English who have the time or are willing to put so much effort into something that is utterly unprofitable as poetry. I see the profit in the opportunity to dress the work in a different language and see how it fits, bringing out some features and covering the others, changing the appearance while still underneath it's the same body. The fact that the same idea can bypass its linguistic and cultural boundaries and reach the new audiences across the world seems magical to me. And it's always worth my time, regardless of all the drudge work that comes with it.
Okay. Marina is a wonderful translator and I'm very grateful. So she came to me years ago now, contacting me and telling me, Monika, I want to translate your book because I simply love it. It will be my thesis and this is it. So it was years ago, my first book when she took it. So this is the second one she translated now. So another poem. O prvom susretu pjesnikinje i pjesme. Imala sam spremne alate za obrađivanje djetinjstva i samo što se nisam bacila u gorkost posla, ja djevojčica lažljiva koštica, ja majka neispravna voćka, prepolovljena raspadom u kompost za leteće riječi kojima se češljaju prve naoblake srca. Mogla sam strpljivo na stol iznijeti pun tanjur laži, preduhititi pjesmu i prstom joj nacrtati oči da ugleda nedjelju ili urednu čitateljicu. Mogla sam je našmikati samoglasnike, nagovoriti je da useli pod perje južnog cvrkuta, promijeni magnetske polove knjiga. Mogla sam, ali sam instinktivno priznala, u mojoj galaksiji zvijezde se rađaju kao abeceda, u maglicama pršti od glasovnih promjena, muž mi je prasunce koje grije moje praznine okamenjene kao prve fosile, najveća je da ne znam razgovarati s ljudima. Tako me u kalendar zabilježila pjesma kao nesvakodnevan događaj. Ti si djevojčica čija se fizika ne može slovkati, ti si žena čija je proizvodnja sreće neprimjerena podrijetlu iz Gomolja. Sintaksu prema meni kao da te portretiram, kaže pjesma i posegne riječima u kosu poput kćeri. Premeće pramenove i susrete, razmješta zagrljaj kao dnevni boravak. Što će oživjeti poezijom, ako ne bubrenje tuge, žena beskonačno razmaknuta od kopna, pust parlament, opljačkana sela, glasna tišina izumiranja koja se jučer skupila u dječji doručak.
So before I read the English, let me just point out that the word poem in Croatian is pjesma, and that's a feminine noun. Well, it's significant. On the first encounter of the poet and the poem, I laid out all the tools to overturn my childhood, and just as I was about to get down to bitter work, I, a little girl, a lying kernel, I, a mother, a faulty fruit tree, split into two, turned compost for the winged words grown to brush off the first clouds covering the heart. I could have patiently set the table with a plate of lies, got ahead of the poem and drawn its eyes with my finger so she'd get to see Sundays or a precise reader. I could have applied some makeup on her vowels, convinced her to make home under the feathery wings of southern chirruping, to reverse the book's magnetic poles. I could have, but I instinctively admitted in my galaxy stars are born like ABCs, the nebulae fizzing with sound changes. My husband, a proto-sun warming my deep faults, petrified like the first fossils, the big one, I don't know how to talk to people. That's how the poem marked me in her calendar, as an extraordinary event. You are a little girl whose physics can't be spelled out. You are a woman whose output of happiness is at odds with your tuber origin. Turn your syntax my way, like I'm painting your portrait, says the poem, and her words reach for my hair like a daughter's, rearranging strands of hair and our encounters, moving our embraces around the living room furniture. What can poetry rouse to life except the swelling sadness, a woman endlessly far from the land, an empty parliament, ransacked villages, a loud silence of extinction which pooled yesterday in the kids' breakfast.
Thank you.
Thank you. I was interested in just asking a few questions, and you can choose to answer as you care to. But I'm interested because you did study physics and came into poetry as a scientist. sort of how did that play out for you? And how do those things interact when you're working? I'm interested.
Well, yes, I had that background, but for me, poetry was a long, long love, as well as the books. And maybe the thing is, for me as a human being, there is no much difference in poetry or literature and physics, because I think that it's very important, especially today, since we are now trying to understand knowledge as something very narrow, to understand how important it is to think of it as a big well, because the creativity you need to solve problems in physics is the same creativity that you need to write poetry. And in the end, it's the same way of connecting things. I was talking about it yesterday, language. So when you talk about physics, it has mathematical language. So you work with equations. Again, it's letters, but in a way, it's just the shift of the language. So physics is also a language of nature. We have translated nature to us, so we can understand physical laws. And there's immense beauty in it. So when I read equation, because that's why I went to physics, to understand the language, I read poetry and I read stories. One, equation from physics tells you immense story of how something has begun, what is going to happen with it. So it has even various dimensions of time and space in it. So it's like you read the best fiction, which is true ever. So there is no much difference in one and the other. And I think this is important to know today, because I think that even writers and physicists, need to know that if they want to be better physicists, or scientists, or anything, they need to read. They need to read fiction, they need to read poetry, and good poets, yes, they need to understand the world around them. We need to know what is happening even in the machines, what is the engine's difference, at least on the basic level. And if you have the deeper level, you can understand more what you want to say, because you have more dimensions you can work with. So I was always a poet, and in the way I fell in love with physics when I was younger. So we were a long year, we were refugees, and when we came back to a village where my family was from, it is a very small village on top of the hill, and my father made a garage. So I would climb up during the night, hiding and going out secretly out of the house. And I would climb and I would watch for stars for, as long as I could stand the weather. And I remember that nothing made me as happy as the thought that there is this immense beauty and we are constantly capable of seeing and understanding it. And we only need a bit of effort to do so. And just to mention that we now live in the most interesting time even of the universe, because in some far, far away future, the galaxies will be so far away from each other because the universe is expanding, that maybe some life forms in the distant future will not even know that there are other galaxies. So what Hubble made like a huge discovery, wow, we are not alone, there are other galaxies. Maybe there will be at some point in the future, the time this will not be possible because the light will have to travel too long to reach some civilization. And we are here in the time when the sun is only 5 billion years old. We have another 5 to go and it will die off, it will probably eat us. So this is the end, yeah, so if you want to know. So we are here and we can know, and everything around us, and it's considering the universe, us, each other, because also I always remember Kant saying that he's mostly touched by the moral laws that we have inside of us, to paraphrase, and the universe above him, the skies above him. So, and I think this is the truth, because a human being is a beautiful universe too, and understanding how immense beauty out there is, we can also understand that a lot of it is mirroring in us. But, it's good to have knowledge to go deeper in it. So, yeah. For me, it's the same. That was the final answer. Yeah.
That's a wonderful response. Thank you. I'm interested in a couple of things. I know that you've got a play that's on right now in Zagreb, and I'm interested in hearing more about some of the things you've done other than poetry. I know you've had a couple of plays put on, and that you do other things as well. So if you talk a little bit about that, that would be good.
Yes, I think that literature and text is like organic being, and I think that when we think about literature, and when I think about it, I always think like one being that can, sometimes become poetry, and sometimes it moves through another genre. You sometimes need a voice, more voices. What do you do when you have more voices? Then you make a play. Well, and because it would be funny for poems to fight each other. Maybe that's a good, concept, poems fighting each other in the next collection. But I think that when you have you understand that literature is a playground, then you can, simply jump, okay, now I will play plays, now I will do poetry, because I think that texts do live in us, and that every text we have to write, it's the story, it could be poetry, it could be a novel, a short story, but it has to find its own language. This is what I deeply believe, that everything that we have to say, we need to touch it until we feel the bones and the structure, everything, and then we know that we have found the correct language for it. And sometimes this is something that we don't expect. I did not expect that I will write plays, but suddenly I was writing a play because poetry was not enough at that point, and I wanted to say so much more, and I had my own restrictions in poetry. How do I see a poem? So I needed to jump into something else. So in my way, the text is the text. When I write an essay, I simply write. And sometimes I just see that, but everything is a practice. So if you are a writer, I think that you simply need to understand how to listen your own intuition good. So after a while, this inner voice tells you very precisely, sit down, you start to write, it goes out to be a poem. Good. You start to write. You understand that you have a story. Okay, you follow the short story. So you just have to understand yourself and listen to yourself. But that is a very complex and deep story about listening ourselves, which we don't do. We don't listen to our body. We don't listen to our mind because we are disconnected most of the time from ourselves. But when we do listen to ourselves, this inner voice really tells us, at least this is my case, where I'm going to. And then, for example, at this point, I'm thinking about a play, I have a structure for it, but it's still not calling me. I have to see, is it a play? Because I see something, but I have to touch it more. But I have very, high voices of poetry. Some women, again, are, fighting my head, and they want to scream, so I had to give them voice. So, yeah, I think it's literature is the same, always, the beauty of the text, but sometimes it just wants to jump out differently. Yeah. It has a life of its own, and I don't know who said it, but the texts, luckily, are more smart than the writers are. And the most beautiful thing that happens to you as a writer, I think Tolkien said that when there was the showing off of the, how do you call Viggo Mortensen in the novel, in the movie it's Viggo Mortensen, Aragorn, good God. I think Tolkien is now, doing this in the grave, and I really was in love with Aragorn for years, but he will forgive me. But he was the most, he said once that he was more surprised than hobbits when Aragorn showed up in that, how to say, a little cafe, not cafe, it's, I need a word, krčma, but...
a tavern.
Yeah, tavern, yes, a tavern. So this is what is good, that texts are smarter than we are because they do follow intuition that is sometimes far away from our conscience part.
I have one more question for you, and then we'll open it up to our audience. Is that about right, Piers? So my last question is just that, how would you describe how your poetry has evolved from your first book to this book, and the things that have interested you and that you've addressed? Because I've seen poems from the first book, and I think they really are quite different than these in some ways.
Yes, luckily we change. I think this is the most beautiful thing about human beings. We can change. And I really do deeply believe in change as an author, but also as a human being, because that means we can always get better, and that means things are not lost. And this means also great things for hope, and to simply know that there are always turning points in which you can grow. And as an author, I think maybe it's the same in every field, that once you are doing something, for me it's important that I do my best, but that I'm better than I was last time. So this is my, kind of running with myself. So I simply love to give myself challenges. So yes, initial coordinates were in kind of my safe zone, I would say, because I was in familiar background that I could describe more easily. Then I realized also that if I'm forever to write one book, that could be a problem too, because writers often jump into that, how to say, zamka, trap. So they continue to write all the time one book, which for maybe that's not a bad thing. For me, it would be a bad thing because I would not like that for myself. So I realized that I need the freedom from the first book. So I gave myself a challenge to write completely different another book in set of voices, to try to deliver a different style, to move out from myself in a different way. And the third book is also different. And the fourth that I'm writing, poetry, is also something completely different. And I'm so happy writing it. And I'm like, oh wow, this is it. The freedom is finally here, because this is the craziest I have written. So I'm very, very having much fun. But it's the learning process, because this is something also we must not forget. When you want to get good at something, you never look at what others are doing, but you simply follow yourself, and you look to learn every day. So I read a lot of poetry. I really do read like 2 books a week probably. Some of the books I have read for 10 and more times, the books I really like, and the books I really love to uncode, because some of the poetry is not that easy to decode, and for me as an author, I really wish to decode it, so I read it and read it and read it, and I'm very persistent at it. But I think it's the same thing with the prose. I'm writing my first novel now, and it took me some time to find the voice and to see where am I going to go with this. And it is revealing itself now for months. I'm writing, so it can sound very strange, because I was writing another novel for 4 years, then I jumped into another thing, but this was a process. So out of that process came out a completely other thing, which I'm writing now for a year and a bit more. And I know now what I want to do, because this, wandering of 4 years gave me the direction, because it took me a bit more to hear the intuition, the voice. But now I'm there, and I'm different than I would have been 4 years ago, 3 years ago, a year ago, which also means that I have grown, and this is something that is for me important. And how do I know that this is happening? Because I see mistakes I usually would not see. This is a good way to check yourself. So yes, I think, and reading is as everything else has its exercise. Reading is the most important exercise for writing. It should be like 10 times, 20 times, even maybe sometimes 100 times more than writing, you know, in this scale. And I think different books do also, when you write something, you have to realize what is your orbitrik, you know, because some of the books provoke you more, give you more, and they kind of put you more in a place where you want to be. So you need to find your exercise material. What will you read while you write? So yes, I had no idea did I answer the question, but I'm coming there.
Oh, thank you, that's terrific. Well, we'd like to open it up to the floor if you would like to, if there's anybody has any questions for us. I'm trying to look at you while still speaking into the microphone.
Yes, I'm coming back.
Pierce has a microphone.
Thank you for being here. I have a couple of actually sort of surface level questions, but I'm going to ask them anyway with the idea that maybe the answers won't be surface level, even though the questions maybe are. There are two, and they're not connected. The first, I wonder if you're interested at all in the personage of Sophie Germain, the mathematician. You're talking about these different mathematicians. It kind of got me thinking of her, and I feel like there's this kind of strange mix of, in a way, recognition, because she was recognized by the top mathematician of her time, but then obviously like forgetting of her. So I wondered, have you written about her? Is she sort of part of the, because I know there are all these women mathematicians. Is she someone you've thought about?
Well, I haven't written about her, but I think this, and I haven't written about a lot of women that should have been in the book, and I'm still writing about a lot of them, so I have like a list. It's very crazy because every time I encounter, and this is very often a woman who should have been on the list. For example, I haven't heard, maybe I have the other pronunciation. She was the mathematician of the Arabic world, yes?
I'm thinking of the French one.
Sophie. So yes, that's why I'm asking. I don't understand. Maybe I think I didn't even hear for her, for example.
Okay.
So this is interesting
Okay.
because every time when you come talking or digging, you hear about another woman who has been put down on the ground, or simply, how to say, zakopana, erased, buried. And this is very interesting because I could now name you a list of physicists, for example, who never got to have any kind of recognition. For example, there are some biologists too, some of them famous, some of them less famous, but when you come to this list, it's a huge list. And I still have the list, and sometimes now I'm even thinking that it should be like a short story, maybe huge book or a cycle of the short story things, because in closed season I managed to capture only few. Even the first poem that is an opening for phobia, I put some, for example, quotes like, there are some discoveries made by women. I didn't name the women because I realized that there's so much, at least I could put some things, like, so maybe someone will follow the trace. What else did women do? So I think this is an ongoing work because, for example, when I dig out the internet, very often, as you now mentioned me a name, maybe I have heard it, but I should see the written. Yes, because we pronounce things differently.
I'm going to come and write it
Yes,
for you
yes.
afterwards.
So this is the thing, because that is something sometimes also happen. But it's so interesting how immense number of women has been, yes, buried. And I still have so if you listen to yourself, I think that all of us can hear the voices of these women. Sometimes I hear it like almost loudly, saying we need our story. And there's them, and there are grandmothers, great-grandmothers, all the lines in our family also that are never mentioned, for example, because they didn't do anything like important. But what is even with the women that did such a job and are still forgotten? I was, who did I encounter last? No, I was reading a book about Marie Curie, for example. It's a wonderful novel, biographical a bit. And when I was reading that novel, I realized that I only knew the name of Marie Curie, the only one. So she was the only one who was a woman and was mentioned during my schooling. And she's the only woman who got 2 Nobel Prizes. Only person who got 2 Nobel Prizes in chemistry and physics. But we never know what is the background story. And when you start to read about everything she has been through, so the radiation has killed her in the end. Her daughter, who was also a scientist after that, she was also killed by the radiation because she was working in the same line. So, and this is something that and then when you discover how rejected at the beginning she was, how huge, immense fight she put up, even to be recognized at that time, and she had to die for it. So it's like, and this is, yeah, maybe the cost, but she had to have 2 Nobel Prizes to get to the textbooks. In my education, she was the only one. And when I remember during my schooling, we had this show, radio, and a science radio show in student radio. And during one show, before the show, I was going through the college, chemistry and physics and mathematics, asking for students how many women in science do they know. Marie Curie was the only one. So we were studying something women had a lot to do with, never hearing about women. For example, Emmy Noether that I was writing here about, we never mentioned her name. So her name was mentioned like this: it is Noether theorem. So Noether theorem. And everyone expected, of course, for Noether theorem to be a male theorem, you know. And only later I realized, you know, digging, oh, it's Emmy Noether, fuck you all, you know, why didn't you tell it was Emmy Noether, you know, because everyone assumes that every fucking theorem is made by a man. It is not. But then I started to dig out the women, even during my education, that were not mentioned. So you learn about, I was in astrophysics section, so I had a lot of, you know, things, how to say, subjects in astrophysics. So we talk about dark matter, so we talk about pulsars, but no one ever mentions Jocelyn Bell, no one ever mentions Vera Rubino. So you have like a list of not mentioned women, even when they could be mentioned, because you learn about their discoveries. So, yeah. But you will write me down, maybe, yes.
I will.
And the second question?
Yes, and the only point to push back, and I maybe you didn't really mean this, and I wonder if you did, but you were distinguishing between important women and not important women. And I guess my only pushback in what you just said would be that other women were also, I mean, you don't.
Yeah, they're important.
This is still important.
They're important, but what I wanted to say, it's like I don't have the very good, how to say, language. Yes.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to say, when you put female on the, you know, things they do, how to say, so in the world made by man, if you did some things, you should be mentioned. So even those who did were not mentioned. So what to do with the rest who, by their measures, were probably not even a human beings, you know. So this is something that is a huge problem, because every story should matter, but even by your measures, you know, of accomplishment, you do something and still you are not mentioned. So what does that mean? Where is the, you know, what is the catch? You know, if you do follow, you know, the rules, and then, for example, a lot of women who were even breaking through the science, because a lot of them who did this kind of things had to be first to enroll in the colleges, had to be first, so they were pioneers in many levels, not only for the breakthroughs. And in many cases, they used to be volunteers. So they were always not paid for what they do. Rarely there was a payment for that, for their discoveries and so on, for their work as a scientist. For example, the huge case with Jocelyn Bell. So the pulsar discovery was made by her. So she was in the laboratory, and she really did detect the pulsar sign. The paper was signed by few men, and her mentor, so her mentor on the project. So she was the only woman who was signed on the paper that later got Nobel Prize Award. Everyone from that list got the Nobel Prize Award but her. It was a huge scandal, and it was never brought to justice. So how do you, so this is what I meant, like, even by the rules of this, you don't fit the, so what then is a rule, you know? This is what you wonder. Yeah.
I'm glad I asked that. My last question, sorry for monopolizing here, but I noticed that you seem to like the color red, and I wonder, is there some personal significance to that? Is it connected to what you said about intuition? Is there anything to that? I wonder.
I love her color red, yes, yes. Well, I think it's the color, for me it's the color of the blood and the resistance, but I think it's even this deep, like, not to go in the ways of, but intuitively I love red, but I love the significance of red. And for my personal thing, I think the red is important color because of, so not to be, but I think we don't talk about a lot of things enough, including menstruation, periods. I don't think we talk about abortion rights enough. I don't think we talk about any of these things. And for me, red has this all meanings in this various connections to, primarily to blood, yes, but it's also life. For example, I think that when you accept your body and what it can do and what it is, and to, you know, clean the taboos about it, then you are suddenly free. And I think this is something, for example, I don't know how is it here in Boston, but in Croatia, in Balkans, we still don't discuss not even menstruation properly. So if you talk about it, you say you have things, or you say you have, I don't know, but you avoid the word, and then you hide your menstrual things, so you hide everything. We have a huge problem, but I know it's also the problem in the States at the moment with abortion rights. So we have, you know, various fronts in which we, and when you think about that, so we still didn't go through menstruation, and women have it every month. So what does this, you know, where does this put us? I was writing one text about menstrual poverty. It's a big thing in Croatia still, and we don't talk about that too. And the amount of comments, misogyny comments, both from men and women, was like 400 of them. So you would like to look at this and thinking, good God, and we cannot discuss this still. So it's a process, but red took me somewhere else probably. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Other questions?
Yes.
I think it was an acceptance speech of yours. You said poetry doesn't have to be the truth, but it does have to be honest. And it got me thinking about people that talk a little bit about physics are like it's binary, it is this or that, it is factual. And I feel like people who really get into physics are like, it is so queer, it is so ever-changing. It's like, and I was wondering, like, going from physics to poetry, you kind of talked about this, but if you could say more, was it challenging? Because I know some people in physics are like, it's factual and it's drilled into us and there's no really room for nuance. And then other people are like, oh my God, no, this is like, the whole universe is like so queer and crazy and ever-changing. And did that translate smoothly to poetry, or did you find yourself struggling with that? Or was it like a solid foundation? Or like, I guess, how were you taught physics, and did it, I don't want to say prepare you, but like, in the transition, did it feel like kind of magical and smooth, or like, oh man, I was like taught it very rigidly, I guess?
Well, I think that the answer lies in the fact that I was always a poet. Maybe that's the easy way out, you know, and because I remember that I have written poetry since I was primary school, and I was in a small village school, so it was very strange because it was 9 of us in the class, and I was crazy writing poetry. Rhymed first, and then later on I kind of got out. But it always appealed to me, so I always felt that connection with words. And later on, when I was making a decision, what road should I take in, I remember that my professor, who was a beautiful mathematician in my high school, she told me, Monika, you will always be able to write if you study physics. But if you go study in creation, it's comparative literature, there is no creative writing, only literature, you will never be able to be in physics again, because for physics, the education is far more rigid. And then she said to me that this is the decision I should make about that. But I think that when you come from, if you want to jump from one thing to another, I think that if you allow yourself, and that means to believe yourself, and maybe to have a good mentor, is also important, because, for example, I do a lot of creative writing workshops, and I work with people from various spheres, and what connects them all is that some of them were writing, but most of them comes just to try something new, and they don't even believe they could write a poem. But if you lead them and unlock them, suddenly the poetry comes out. So I think that this unlocking is very important. Sometimes when we are in ways of being aware of our locks, we also find ourselves protecting them without even knowing it. But if someone unlocks you, you kind of, let go to do that, because it tricks you in a way even. So I think that, but also when you want to start writing, I do also think that you first need to read a lot and then evolve as a reader. If someone was, to start writing poetry and she said, I now want to write poetry, I would say, okay, let's start with what have you read in last, I don't know, a year? What kind of poetry? And if she said, I didn't read poetry, I would say, okay, we have to do that first. And then I would start with probably, I don't know, I was seeing here collections of Mary Oliver and Andrea Gibson, and something that is quite open to, perception and intuitive in words, and then you can build on. And so, after a while of reading, you can ask, okay, are we ready now to, answer one of the poems? And then someone was to answer the poem, and suddenly probably he could make a poem, she could make a poem. And so there is no, I think, limitation or the box that is set upon us, because every box is just as a border, a construct. And anytime we wish, we can exit it, but we have to want to exit it. And for everything, there is an exit strategy. So confinement of physics or mathematics, yes, there is an exit strategy. You just have to get closer to the poetry. But expect of yourself that suddenly you will write, not knowing anything about poetry, like you have always been born with it, that this doesn't happen. For example, I was studying and I didn't write for years. And I remember I had a huge trouble with anxiety because I was working a lot during my college and I couldn't cope with things that well, and I was anxious and depressive, and luckily our college had, you could ask help from psychologist and therapist. So I went there and I was going for visits for quite a while, because so she was thinking, will she give me medication or can we continue this? And we decided together that I can continue now this and then we will later decide. And she told me, I remember the question, what are you doing for yourself? And I was thinking, what do you think what I'm doing? I mean, I'm studying, I'm what I'm doing for myself. I take a shower, hopefully, every second day, if it's a good day. And then I was then there, and she said to me, "But what do you really like to do?" And I like to write poetry, I like to read poetry. And she asked me, "When did you last do that?" I couldn't remember. And then I decided, okay, I will go for a poetry book, and I will come, because I haven't read or written poetry for 3 or 4 years then at that moment. And I remember the feeling coming back to it and doing something, yes, for myself. I was happy as a little child. And the poetry I have written at that time was horrifying. It was very bad. I found my first published poems recently, and I was reading them, and I was happy back then, like, wow, I was published now, in a magazine. That was important back then. Like, okay, first publishing. Now I read them and I think, oh, Monika, this is not good. I mean, it was okay, but it's not that good, really not that good. But also what happens that when you have determination to become better, you do become better. Then I, surrounded myself. Life then, if you decide to do something, I deeply believe that life gets you somewhere in various ways. So I met some brilliant and beautiful friends, poets. They would bring me poetry magazines, books. I would talk with them. And suddenly I was surrounding myself with people who did this, and they were, wow, they're doing it. And step by step, here I am in Boston, Massachusetts. Yeah, thank you.
So you spoke a little bit about women's accomplishments in science being discounted often and throughout history. And I'm curious because there's tends to be sort of a misconception that sort of discounting of women and their accomplishments doesn't exist in such a severe way in the arts, or it's less. And so I guess I'm curious about your perspective on misogyny in publishing and misogyny in writing, and sort of the comparisons between the two.
It's the fucking same thing.
Yeah.
I was today in a museum and I was thinking, and I remember the feeling in Frankfurt. I was in one museum and during the fair, and I remember 3 floors, not a single woman. And here also, I had to come, I don't know where, at this, how to say, Stalny Postav, the exhibit all the time that is going on. So you have to go through everything and everything and everything in the end to finally find a piece by a woman.
At the museum.
At the museum, yes. So it's the same thing in art. And so women who manage to, just to take the textbooks that I have mentioned and only having, Marie Curie, I remember in our textbooks in Croatian language, I think that we had, there was one poem by Vesna Parun, we have one. And I tried to remember, did we ever mention any contemporary author? I think not, because I remember Vesna Parun and in the first grades, Ivana Brlić-Mažuranić, 2 in the entire school. So this is, how do we call this? We call it a problem. So now you can come with this okay, but women have not been writing. So, but the question is then, why haven't they have been writing, They were not allowed to be writing. So this is the huge thing. And there are some also stories now about women who were writing under male names. Sometimes even their husbands would take credit for the things they have written because they knew that this is the only way they could get published or they could get on stage with the theater shows and so on. So, but we are now at 2025. Okay, we can say those were the days. But when you see today publishing, and I come from Balkans, So now we do have women that are published, but still, every time when it's very hard to explain actually, because, for example, all the main awards, then everything that is happening with the biggest awards, with how many women in finals, with and so on and so on, it's mainly men. And I think that this is slowly changing, but not that fast. And I think that misogyny is still present in a way that maybe we sometimes even don't understand. Because to be a woman, for example, I always mention this because it's a very funny thing. So I'm 35. I was the youngest winner of this award in Poland. It was my second book. I had other 2 international awards and more than 20 national awards and regional awards. I don't know, I think my books of poetry were published in more than 10 countries, all over translations of more than 20 languages, and so on. And so I'm quite, like, what would you call accomplished? But when it comes to the, recognition of the system, you realize that if you were a man, if I was a man, I would be already considered like a wonder man. I would be like, oh, this beautiful young man is, next Nobel Prize winner or whatever. I would be given maybe, I don't know, a show or this or that. Because this is happening when young men come and they write one text. They get a place and show because it was a fucking good text, So it's still going on, and what we can do is simply fight it by what I realized. I was telling someone, I was reading one essay that was fucking boring, and I was thinking, it's a male essay about nothing, and thinking, I'm not going to do this is so boring, and I turned to text that I really want to read, and this is mostly now female authors, because I want to know more about, if she's writing about how is she cooking and thinking, I want to know that, because this is also my problem, how to cook and think at the same time, how to do this and that at the same time. So, and what we often have to have in mind is that most of the readers and people who buy books are women. So, we all as readers need this kind of themes and subjects, because I think, and this doesn't mean that men should not, write, but I want not a book about nothing. I want then you write me something important, What do I want to know about men today? How are you dealing with emotions? How are you dealing with misogyny? What is your way out of misogyny? This is what I would love to read about, Not simple solutions, but give me something important for me today too. So hopefully, yes, I hope it will get better. What I can see is that writers arise and more we uncover the stories of our, ancestors sounds very, but the women behind us. So finally we are starting to speak about things through literature, about life as its, costs. What was it like to be a mother? What is it like to be a mother? Motherhood is a huge theme. We haven't even, touched how hard it is, how very exhausting it is, how, and this is only one thing. Then, as I mentioned, abortion. Then, as I mentioned, what is with women who work, and how do they deal with the ceiling, the glass ceiling, yes. Then so many subjects we all want to know about. And how do we deal with the body? How do we deal, and this is what we have mentioned, this is all the stories that are so important, and they're not scientific accomplishments or something, but they're our lives, and they're so important to know about, because I really want to know how are we dealing with menstruation, and is this in any way have been written since Erika Jong, because Erika Jong gave it like pages, when she got menstruation in the hotel and there are all descriptions, and I haven't found it since then, written like that very vividly. So, and I'm wondering why, because now I think that we are coming back to it, that we have to read, not only read, but like even things we have written about have suddenly become forgotten, and we have to revise, check again. How do we feel with our bodies? How do we fight for our bodies' independence? And so on and so on. I really want to read a great novel about abortion. I really want to, and I had an abortion when I was 20. I'm a normal and successful woman, and I'm really happy to talk about it. So let's not normalize these kind of things, because it's the normal ways of female lives. I have no idea what did I, answer, but yeah.
Are you happy with that answer, Kayla? Yes, I think she is. Wonderful. Thank you all so much for those incredible questions.
Should I ask one more question?
Yes, one more.
Very inspiring, thank you. Both of you, actually, as always. So, a question in the end, to try to be positive about the future. What would you suggest, and we as a Croatian community here in Boston actually have a very small but pretty mighty group of people who are leading the school for our children, teaching them not only the language but the culture, and crossing the chasm between the two cultures actually. So how would you recommend to our phenomenal teacher, educator, where is she, Andrea? She was here a second ago. How do you recommend that she brings this topic in a way that's appropriate for young children so that they are not in the space where we were?
Well, I think we have to, think about the educational system. I'm now trying to do workshops. I work with children too. I try to bring workshops in my area. It's very deserted nowadays after the earthquake and after the war. So it had two very strong traumas of the space and for the people in the last decades. So I do a lot of workshops, but now I started also to do develop a workshop in which I try. It's called I Read and Write Women. So how to put the names of the women that are pushed out and forgotten. Let's, write a small text about them. Let's investigate about them. Let's find something. If you're studying physics, let's do 5 female scientists in physics. Biology, doesn't matter. Even, if you mention them a couple of times, children are smart, they come with the knowledge. So I think it's these small things you do, and you can always, make, depends on, of course, how old are the children, but if you have a small group, then you take a female, scientist, literature author, or someone, or you take a children's book in which both of the authors are female, and you teach about the process, and you simply, put them in the position that it's a normal thing for them to read a female author. And then you take another woman, I don't know, like this, she was cooking in the laboratory, this and that, but that's just for them to hear she, because I have 2 children, I have a son and a daughter. And my daughter was asking me when she was 4, so we would, to go somewhere, and I would read her the signs, doctor, dentist, things like that. In Croatian, there is a distinction between male and female things, and she was always asking me, Mama, ali gdje je zubarica? Where is the, female dentist? Where is the doctor, female doctor? And so she was already aware of that. Then we would drive somewhere, and she would ask me, why are all the drivers in the, buses or trains, or why are they all men? Isn't this possible for girls to do? So they see it. You don't have to implement, we all see it all the time. And not to mention all the other questions she had asked me, but it's a good thing because I can discuss it with her. But I realize that the fact that I can discuss it with her doesn't mean that others, are capable of doing so. So I think that if we put small seeds like that and think about how to put in everyday education, for example, in Croatia, there are fabulous women in every branch of, everything that have been also pushed out. And you can dig out, I think even nowadays we have finally publishing books about them, like, all the women who did this or that in Croatia. But small things, so they don't think everything was made by man, because it wasn't, and everything will be made by man because they have never saw things being different. So yeah, and it's possible. They're very. When I do this kind of workshops, the reaction for the various ages, it's very good. They really love to dig out, and they kind of feel even they're doing something, especially the older ones. They're doing something important because they realize that this was unjust. And this is very important for them, to give them opportunity that with the knowledge they dig out, they make it justice.
An incredible final question and answer. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. That was amazing.